One.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. We are live. I'm Siobhan Sarna with SIBOSOS. Kiran Krishnan is here. You may not know his name, unless, of course, you've been to the SIBOSOS summits, then you do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure you're familiar with his work. If you have ever tried to figure out what probiotic should I take, what is the difference between a spore probiotic? Spore? What? Is that dirt? Help me. This gentleman is in demand when it comes to international conferences. He trains other teachers, doctors, researchers, and trainers about probiotics and the microbiome. And it is a pleasure to have him here with us today at SIBOSOS in this podcast, Facebook Live, all the different ways that we're getting to you. Hello, kind sir. Thank you for fitting us into your busy schedule.
Hi, of course, it's my pleasure. I was so excited when I saw this on my schedule and realized that we got to talk again and get this really important information out into the public space.
It's so important, and there's so much confusion. So let's get to it. We have a lot of questions for you as well. And I wanted to start with, okay, I hope everybody's, folks are getting a hold of us because this is going to be a podcast as well as our Facebook Live.
Okay.
And I wanted to let's get to this. What is a spore-based probiotic versus stuff that's like grown in a petri dish on, how do they do it? Milk? I don't know. How does it work?
So typically, your conventional probiotic is a dairy-based product. So it's made through dairy fermentation. Long time ago, people started doing dairy fermentation, which is actually quite healthy and produces really beneficial compounds in the ferment. And then they started taking these dairy-based strains of bacteria and then isolating them, concentrating them, and using them as probiotics. That's where the Lactobacillus acidophilus, for example, comes from, the one that is very commonly found in most probiotics. And then we started looking at what is existing in people's stool samples, and you find a lot of bifidobacteria, lactobacillus. So they started isolating these strains, growing them up in factories, and then trying to reintroduce them into the gut as a probiotic, as a supplement or a food. The problem with that is, your type of lactobacillus and bifidobacteria that you have in your gut is completely unique to you. So the stuff that you might find in a store, on the shelf, in a product, could more than likely, and is typically foreign to your body. So they don't necessarily have the capability of going in, living in your gut, and causing any sort of functional change. In fact, most of them, because they tend to be very sensitive bacteria, and most people know this because if you go to a health food store, a lot of them are in the refrigerator, right? And they kept in the refrigerator because at room temperature, they would start to die off, which is a nice, calm 70 degrees. But what you tend to find is that because they're so sensitive, they end up dying through the stomach. So you're kind of just pooping them out. Everything good?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. You end up just kind of pooping them out, and they don't really colonize or live in your gut permanently, or even for a period of time. So what we were looking for was a source of bacteria that we could feel comfortable that our ancestors were in contact with for the majority of human evolution, and ones that would actually go in and cause kind of a functional change and a cleanup in the gut. And that's in the environment. Our ancestors got all their probiotics from the environment. They didn't have specialized health food stores with refrigerated sections and bacteria with fancy capsules on them to get their probiotics, but they just were smart enough to eat dirt. So they didn't sterilize their homes, they didn't sterilize their environment, they, for the most part, didn't sterilize their food, and they ended up consuming a lot of bacteria from the environment. And when you dig into the research, there are certain classes of bacteria in the environment that have the capability of surviving through the gastric system and then actually functioning like a probiotic bacteria in the gut for you. And those really specialized bacteria are called spore formers. And in particular, bacillus endospores. So bacillus endospores are found in the environment, but they live in the gut as their natural home. They, in fact, use the environment as a vector, as a way to get from host to host. And so when they get into the gut, they survive through the gastric system, unlike conventional probiotics, because they have this like spore armor-like coating around themselves. And then the moment they get past the stomach acid, they get into the small intestine, they bust out of this shell, and they become a live functioning probiotic. And based on the studies we've done, they do so many important housekeeping functions, including one that I just posted on my Facebook account a couple of days ago. Studies show that these particular bacteria, especially Bacillus subtilis, is directly associated with competing against and eliminating really pathogenic antibiotic resistant bacteria like Staphylococcus aureus, like MRSA. We've all heard of MRSA, right? Methicillin resistant Staph aureus. Those are some of the scariest bacteria we have because they cause infections, they cause death, they cause illness, and we have no antibiotics that can fight against them. And in a large-scale study that was done on over 200 subjects, they found that these spores from the environment completely inhibit those pathogenic bacteria. So they do all these wonderful things for us, many of which I'm sure we'll talk about today.
Yeah, that's very exciting. I think that's that's a wonderful explanation about what it is.
Yeah, thank you.
You're such a great communicator. I want to confirm that everybody who's watching us live right now can indeed see and hear. So just, type in a smiley face and click the heart or thumbs up or something so we can tell, guys, because we tend to live in a vacuum when we're doing these Facebook Lives. So we've got some hellos. And is it okay to share the link? Yeah, share the link. We love share the love. And yes, you guys are seeing us. Okay, great. Are you ready for some questions, Kiran? Ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. Dun, 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 dun. From Ingrid, for someone who has methane dominant SIBO with hydrogen as well, and also histamine, oxalate, fructose sensitivities, clearly leaky gut, and is deeply challenged by taking any meds, supplements due to a multi-system reactions, but needs gut healing. What probiotic do you recommend if that is all you can be put on? So in the past, doesn't mean she won't be able to in the future, but in the past, she can't tolerate Just Thrive or Megaspore.
So a lot of times when people say Just Thrive, they can't tolerate it. It means that when they start taking it, they get die-off reactions, right? And that's not uncommon because in SIBO especially, you tend to have an overgrowth of unfavorable organisms in the wrong place in the small bowel. And when the spores go in, I mean, there's a good clinical trial in Bacillus clausi, for example, that shows that they go in, they can do their quorum sensing, and they actually start to kill off bacteria in the small bowel that are overgrown. Now, as that process is occurring, you will get die-off type of reactions. So a lot of times people will get cramping and bloating, and they'll get additional discomfort in the gut, and they'll say, you know what, I can't handle it, this is too much, I can't tolerate it, and they put it away. The unfortunate thing is when your gut is that messed up, you have to go through some form of a healing crisis, as a lot of naturopathic physicians will call it, in order to get to the other side. Because anytime you make significant changes in your microbiome, that significant change is characterized by these types of symptomology. Now, you can minimize it by going really slow. We've had a lot of people that go as little as like 1/8 of a capsule every 2 or 3 days and just slowly build it up from there, and then you go to like 1/8 of a capsule every day, and then go to a 1/4 capsule every day, and so on. Just slowly build it up. There's some things you can take in addition to try to help some of that die-off symptom. There's an immunoglobulin called IgG, bovine source IgG. You can try that. That typically helps neutralize some of the LPS, some of the toxins that are released by the dying off bacteria, and that can minimize the discomfort and the issues that you might have. And it becomes paramount to get these spores in, because a lot of SIBO, a lot of methane dominant, especially when your body's producing or your gut is producing all of these gases, the gases actually inhibit short chain fatty acid production. And short chain fatty acids are the ones that heal your gut lining and heal and reduce inflammation in your mucosa, and change metabolism in a positive way, and also increases motility, which is another problem with SIBO. So, it's just something you have to get through in order to do it. And you can minimize it by just going really, really slow. It requires extreme patience, and it requires someone who's just absolutely dedicated to just getting better. And that's what I would recommend. I mean, other than that, there's no other probiotics that have been shown to do anything for SIBO. So, at least the spores have a clinical trial that shows that it can bring down the overgrowth of bacteria in SIBO.
Huge. So Ingrid is saying she was doing that. It was 1/16 of a capsule, still too much. No, I get lots of agitation and upregulation, not die off. I don't know what that exactly means, Ingrid.
Right. We'd need more information. I don't know what an upregulation or agitation means. Again, a lot of that is those kind of changes are a positive thing, even though it doesn't feel good. And that I completely understand, but those types of changes are a positive indication. Outside of that, there's no other probiotics that you can use. And, there's very few things you can use in general if you have that type of SIBO and you can't go through that die-off phase. And a lot of people will say, I know it's not die-off. Well, you don't really know that. Die-off, rears its head in hundreds of different ways. Some people get a rash, some people get headaches, some people get fatigue, some people get diarrhea. It shows up in many different ways.
And Ingrid, I'm really, really hoping that you're talking to your practitioner about it. So keep talking to us. We're here for you, and maybe we can figure it out or at least figure out the right questions to ask your provider by the time our Facebook Live is over. I know we've got some great questions. Amy is here. Hey, Amy. Yeah, Amy loves you, Kiran.
Oh, thank you, Amy.
What is the best colostrum to take for the IgG? Interogram is the only one that helps me with tolerance, but it causes SIBO for me.
Yeah. So, there's a big difference between Interogram and colostrum. So colostrum is the dairy component of milk, and it contains a lot of other things besides IgG, some of which people can react negatively to. So we actually, over the last year and a half, have been working with IgG specifically, but it's a serum IgG. So it's a bovine serum IgG. And Interogram is the right one that we're working with, but the Interogram version is a medical food or prescription version. So it also has a lot of dextrose and other fillers in it, or fibers in it. So that's probably what's giving you the SIBO type of response. So we've got a product called Mega IgG, which is the supplement version of that. And that supplement version is called Immunolin. And that Immunolin doesn't have any of those other carriers in it. And that's good because then there's no fermentable component to it. So it's just got high dose of IgG, some IgM and IgA as well, and works phenomenally well in terms of reducing inflammation in the bowel, neutralizing all of the various pathogens, toxins, viruses that can cause problems, and then allows the mucosa and the gut lining the opportunity to heal up. So we find that to be extremely effective, and we have it as part of our kind of total gut restoration protocol. So remember, the supplement version is called Immunolin, and it doesn't have all of the things that Interogram has, which are some of the fermentable carbohydrates. I think that it has cellulose or dextrose in the Interogram, which could be causing your symptoms in SIBO.
Ooh, that's good stuff right there. That's good information. Okay. Ingrid, don't be discouraged. We're here for you. So I know it's aggravating when you hear it, because look, we have people say all the time, I need to get my face back up here. We have people saying all the time, like with the diet, everybody's different. And then I get emails saying, why do you keep saying everybody's different? Because they are. So, saying like it's die off, I know could be a frustrating answer. And that's why I really want you to talk to your provider. Okay. So,
and also let us know what specifically the response you're getting was. I don't know if she wrote that down. I can't see the chat box, but and then also one other thing to try, which I don't know if she has or not, is intermittent fasting and doing a water-free fast. I know fasting will upregulate your migrating motor complex and some of the prokinetics, which will help move the bowel and help to clear out some of those the sustained putrefied bacteria that remain in the small bowel. So intermittent fasting, if you can do that, that's something to discuss it with your provider as well. And I'm sure, I don't know if you're working with a provider, you've probably gone through the rounds of antibiotics and so on, but it's a complex case. It sounds like what you have is a very complex situation, and maybe send me a message and we can talk a little bit more in detail about your specific situation, and depending on where you are, we can refer you to docs that we work with in those areas.
Ooh, I love that idea. That's awesome. That's a great offer. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so is bovine source IgG dairy based if we have dairy issues? Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, so that's the good thing. It's not dairy based because it comes from the serum.
Blood,
It
blood
doesn't
based.
come from the milk. Yeah, so there's no dairy component to it at all. So it's ideal for anyone who has dairy intolerance or dairy sensitivity issues. You won't have that type of response to it.
Okay, let's move to another question then. Methane, this is Casey. Hey, Casey. Methane and hydrogen dominant. What are some safe routes to relieve constipation? She avoids harsh laxatives. Magnesium citrate does not always work. I have a Redosil and, okay, I don't know what these are because I'm not a doctor, but you may, Kiran. I have a Rectosil and Cystosil from childbirth 14 months ago. I'm on the biphasic diet, phase 2, and start treatment in a few days.
Oh, and what kind of treatment she's starting?
What are the same? I don't know. She doesn't say.
Okay.
Yeah, she doesn't say.
So there are numerous prokinetics out there that you could try, and again, if you're under treatment with a physician, make sure you talk to your doctor about any of these because it could. I don't want anything to disrupt what they've already have in plan for you for your recovery. But even simple things like caffeine, of course, exercise gets the bowel moving to some degree. Garlic has been shown to have a pro-motility prokinetic effect. And then there is a prokinetic product that you can buy, which is a herbal product. I'm going to see if I can remember the name of it.
Iberogast?
Yeah, Iberogast.
Iberogast.
Exactly. That a lot of people have talked about significant success. But again, reducing that gas production is key because the gas production, that methane or the hydrogen prevents motility. And one of the things that does that, that counteracts that, is the production of short chain fatty acids. And the kind of the issue that SIBO people face is that the way you increase short chain fatty acids is by taking in oligosaccharides and fermentable fibers, but you can't do that because of the symptomology. So then what happens is you tend to eat more and more protein. And when you eat more protein, more of that protein becomes converted into hydrogen methane gas. And that's a type of fermentation now that your gut prefers to do. And so it's just a self-perpetuating problem. We just released a prebiotic product called Mega Prebiotic, and it's made up of 4 key oligosaccharides. We're having success right now with SIBO patients who are able to tolerate that better than any other prebiotic or fiber. Because what we've done is we've specifically selected oligosaccharides that have a longer degree of polymerization. So that means that the structure is longer, it's more complex, so it's harder for most bacteria to break it down, including the bacteria that are now living in your small bowel that shouldn't be there. So it has a better shot of making it through to the large bowel where you can start getting some short chain fatty acid production. And if you can't do any of those things, look at butyrate supplementation. You may consider some ox bile as well, because one of the things that can help with reducing some of the overgrowth in the small bowel are conjugated bile acids. And so you might not be producing enough bile, which helps prevent some of the overgrowth in the small bowel. So that's something to think about as well. So butyrate supplementation, there are butyrate supplements that you can get, and that may be enough to start triggering some of the counteracting of the gas production. And then look at ox bile as well as something that you may look to try to increase some of your bowel production so that it tempers down some of the overgrowth in the small bowel.
Those are very strong strategies, guys. That's a great series of suggestions. Thank you. Here comes another question for you. Also similar to, this is a couple of things. One is about constipation, because Nancy's also saying when we take any form or dose of magnesium in the form of powder, capsule, or tablets for your constipation, this is Nancy talking, she experiences increased cramping and no bowel movement, methane dominant.
Right.
So Kind of the same answer, right?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, here's why there is constipation in the first place, and it's something called bowel stasis, right? And that happens because you have leaky gut. So obviously your gut is not in great shape. The intestinal lining is obviously leaky and porous. The mucosal layer is not developed the way it should be, and it's not turning over effectively because you're producing very little butyrate and short chain fatty acids. So because of the dietary restrictions on fermentable carbohydrates. So all of that leads to the gut being more and more leaky. Now, what happens when the gut is leaky, you've got LPS endotoxins that migrate from your lumen of your intestines into your enteric nervous system, and it basically shuts down the enteric nervous system. So when you have the enteric nervous system shut down and those neurological signals to move the peristalsis, you end up getting stasis in the bowel. So that's why this constipation, even though you have magnesium, because magnesium is just a tool, right? Magnesium is not something that in itself will move the bowels. It needs to be utilized by your neuronal cells, by your intestinal epithelium, by your microbiome in order to trigger the bowel movement. But since your gut is leaky and the LPS is constantly flowing through and interfering with your enteric nervous system signaling, you end up with this constant chronic stasis. So really the root cause, the way to fix that is to reduce the leakiness of the gut. And that's what we published on. That's what we're doing all our studies on the spores, is the increase, the reduction of the leakiness of the gut. And until you get that leakiness repaired, it's going to be really hard to get the bowels moving, because the bowels require that enteric nervous system signaling. Now, another thing to consider, and again, talk to your doctor about this, but I don't know if you guys are doing enemas. I don't know if you guys are doing, things like retention enemas, where you try to get certain types of bacteria. You can use spore bacteria, you can use butyrate, you can do different things. Coffee enemas tend to help things move and get some of the prokinetics going. Those are things to think about, because this route, the oral route down, is stopped up. So you might look at trying to get some things going on from the other side, but that's something to talk to your doctor about. But if you can get some fermentable carbohydrates, some prebiotics, oligosaccharides, and things like that into your large bowel that way, that might be something that could help increase butyrate production, increase short chain fatty acids, to start healing the leakiness in the gut, so you're not on this perpetual cycle of the gut getting more leaky, you producing more gas.
Okay, good stuff too. Okay, here comes another couple of questions. Okay. This is from Rohan. On my stool test, I have 3 strains of commensal bacteria at imbalance levels. Would it be best to treat this simply by taking probiotics, or would you recommend antimicrobials to reduce their numbers plus probiotics?
So the first thing I would caution him on is that the stool test is more than likely inaccurate, right? So the most recent studies show that the stool tests are less and less useful than we thought they were. Most of them use a process called 16S ribosomal RNA, which has been shown over the last year to be very inaccurate. Also, remember, your stool is not homogeneous. So the sample that you tested will show a particular conformation of bacteria, but you could take another sample in that same day and you could get a different result, because bacteria is not homogenously distributed throughout your fecal matter, right? And so we also don't know what is normal for you. Like those microbes at what the stool test company calls high could be perfectly normal for your microbiome, because everybody's microbiome is different. So more people I have seen end up with trouble with trying to treat to the test than people that have been benefited with this, because you see something in there, something looks high, and people hit it hard with antimicrobials, and you cause long-term dysbiosis because of that kind of treatment. So you got to be really careful. We don't know enough about what each individual's levels should be and so on to tailor tests in that way. That was a complete misnomer, and that's where supplement companies and testing companies jump in on an area that is hot and exciting, but we're just the tip of the iceberg on. So I would be very careful about that. The whole thing is you want to increase diversity. That's one of the things that has held true throughout a decade of microbiome research. It's diversity is paramount to the health of the body and health of your microbiome. So what you should be doing is looking at getting in a diverse diet. So the more diverse your diet is, the more diverse your microbiome is. Adding in intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting actually does increase the diversity of your diet. We just submitted a paper for publication that shows adding in the spores dramatically increases your diversity in as little as 3 weeks. So all of these things that you can do, increasing your diet, diversity of your macronutrients in your diet, eating more roots and tubers and seeds and nuts. And of course, if you have issues with SIBO, then you're limited on that. But, I would still try to add small amounts of a variety of different things if you can, and just see what you tolerate. You might tolerate certain things better than others. But really, at the end of the day, it's trying to achieve diversity. I wouldn't look at trying to target those 3 organisms, whatever they are. I don't think you mentioned which ones, because more than likely they're perfectly normal for your bowel. And even if they're abnormal, we don't know, right? Because we just don't have that kind of information yet.
Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, Robin Lord. Well, Robin, you know who you are, LC. With the same gut, so this is very brand specific, which I know you'll be familiar with. Are the same gut healing benefits taking place using Just Thrive probiotic as Megaspore?
Yeah, so the difference is Megaspore has a higher dose, higher concentration, and one additional strain, which is useful for working with a practitioner or doctor. Just Thrive is designed to be kind of the retail version of it, which is easier for people to take, just one a day if you're not seeing a practitioner. So eventually the same benefits will occur, but it might take longer, and you might have to dose it up to some degree in the beginning. A lot of people that I talk to that are taking Just Thrive, I'll say, well, even though it's designed to be 1 cap a day in the beginning, maybe just do 2 caps a day for the first 30, 40 days or so. So that there's a little bit of a difference in how they're formulated, but the main strains that provide a lot of the benefits are similar in both, or the same in both. So we have some people that will do the Megaspore first, and get all of the therapeutic benefits and make all these big changes, and then they go to the Just Thrive for maintenance. So there are some of those kind of changes as well that people can do, but it really depends on your access. If you have a doc that's carrying Megaspore, your best bet's going to be to work with that doctor who's carrying Megaspore and get all of the benefits then, of course, of the probiotic. But then that doctor will have other things that they can add in to enhance the success as well.
All right, so the SIBO community is full of controversy. Here comes another one. Mm-hmm. I heard there's a risk with soil-based organisms. It seems you never know how they will colonize one's unique microbiome. What if it becomes pathogenic and making toxic spores in certain individuals? Is that a possibility?
No, that's one of the biggest misnomers. So I hear this a lot. People say, what if it becomes pathogenic, or what if it becomes opportunistic? Well, a bacteria is either pathogenic or it's not, right? They don't go from being a benign, helpful bacteria to becoming pathogenic. And the spores certainly aren't. In fact, you have as a human, you've been exposed to way more spores and environmental bacteria than any of these probiotic bacteria that you think of as conventional probiotics. Also, the human race as a species have been exposed to these types of microbes far more than we've ever had high dose of lacto and bifido strains and all that. So that's a complete misnomer. When you start off with a probiotic bacteria, you examine it, you see, does it have any toxigenic capability? Does it colonize? Does it make positive changes? When those things are established and you know what the bacteria is doing, it's not like it can go in some individual and become toxic, and then in other individuals it's beneficial. That's like this crazy nonsense that I've heard perpetuated by people who know nothing about bacteria, by people who know nothing about microbiology. And that's one of the biggest issues, of course, in supplements and the internet and all that stuff, is you get so much misinformation. And that for a decade has been the number one way that conventional probiotic products have tried to battle in the marketplace against what we call spore-based products, by saying that, oh, they could potentially be very toxigenic and scary and all of that. No way. Our ancestors consumed tens of billions of spores every single day, and so have many sick patients in many a hospital around the world since 1952. These strains have been prescription drugs for well over 60 years in 2/3 of the world. So the safety profile of these are not in question at all. And like any genre of bacteria, they can have pathogenic versions. And the whole key is, if you're a company that has done the work to figure out whether the strain you are working with is benign, is beneficial, is commensal, and so on. And that's really where it really comes down to. And we've done all that work.
See, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. There's just a very specific question, and then I've got a couple of other topics for you about the fillers that are in. This is a good question about supplements in general, but is Megaspore cleaner in terms of fillers than Just Thrive? Although I think you've really clarified what the difference is between the two.
Yeah, neither of them really have fillers. We use a prebiotic cellulose in both of them. And the purpose of that is to kind of help activate the spores once they get into the gut. So when the spores get into the small bowel, if there's some form of prebiotics in there, that'll trigger them to come out of their spore state. So then they'll sense the presence of those and they'll start metabolizing them. And that's the energy that they need to come out of the spore state and start multiplying. So that's all there is. There aren't any other fillers in there. It's a cellulose, and it's a teeny tiny amount. It's about 200 milligrams or so in a daily dose. But it's just enough in there for the spores to feed off of it, come out of the spore state, and go to work to clean up your gut.
Guys, if you see any of the little heart symbols and thumbs up, feel free to pop them in, because it does, it keeps us cheerful. And I think it does help with exposure in Facebook, their algorithms, who knows. But if you get a chance to pop any happies on there, we really appreciate it. Okay, so here comes, I know you have a question about the magnesium and Miralax. Just quickly, we had a big webinar yesterday with Dr. Allison Seebecker, and she said that Miralax was fine. There's, the ingredient itself kind of concerns her, but a lot of people do get success with Miralax. Do you have any other, I know you've talked about constipation and a laxative at this point. Do you have any other thoughts on this? Are you like, well, whatever you do, don't do Miralax? Is that your opinion?
No, I think it's okay. I mean, there's a long history of use in it. It's not as clean as some of the amino acid chelates and all these kind of fancy, nice magnesiums we have this day, but it'll get the job done in terms of what you want it for, right? And it's not something you should be consuming every day forever. It is something you would use acutely for a few days, or maybe just once, just to help get things moving. But it's fine. I don't think there's anything particularly toxic or problematic with it.
Okay. Yeah. What about weight? So if you have methane dominant SIBO, chances are you're going to gain some weight. We have a person here who says, wait, I just read it. Oh, I don't want to miss it. She's been doing treatments and she's about to do the elemental diet, but is concerned about underweight. Okay, treated many different herbals. Third round just completed for hydrogen dominated SIBO. Okay, so that's not the weight gain SIBO. Next step is elemental diet, although I'm underweight and so I'm hesitant for that option. Is there anything you're missing in your treatment? Well, first of all, I just want to say this is not medical advice, guys. Use this to go back to your practitioners, of course. And then also, as way simplified. So there's a way simplified scenario right there. But what are your thoughts and comments on that?
Yeah. So did she say she was underweight, right? And she's got hydrogen dominant SIBO. Yeah. So again, a lot of that comes with the idea that people that have either hydrogen or methane dominant, that just kind of indicates the types of organisms that are problematic in your system. But at the end of the day, both of those describe an enteropathy that's going on in the gut, meaning you've got inflammation in the bowel, you've got inflammation in the mucosa, especially in the small bowel, which is where about 75-80% of your nutrient absorption is going to occur. And then whatever is not occurring in that part has to move into your large bowel, where it gets fermented and you get an increased amount of nutrient absorption. So it's just it's a failure to be able to absorb and assimilate nutrients from your food because of the inflammation. So you may consider adding higher levels of micro nutrients or greens, and I would not necessarily do protein, but I would do greens, powders, I would do superfruits, I would do, natural sources of vitamins and minerals, and you would probably need to take higher doses of those than your average person because your ability to absorb them are now compromised because of the inflammation and leakiness of the gut. So anytime you have either of the gas dominant SIBOs, you basically have an inflammatory mucosa, an inflammatory intestinal lining, and that in itself prevents the absorption of calories and prevents the absorption of nutrients as well. So you just have to take more in order to try to get more of that stuff in. And some of these, there's some really good brands out there. There's one that I've used it's called Bare Organics. It's just organic superfruits and various different powders. You can do a spirulina scoop and a maca scoop and a goji berry scoop, and kind of try to increase your micronutrient and antioxidant uptake from those types of fruits.
And then remember, if you are going to do the elemental diet, to make sure you are working with a nutritionist or your math is really excellent and you are able to make sure you are getting enough calories, because you might be having to do 12 servings of that a day. I had to do 9 when I did mine. It's just make sure you're not like dieting with a calorie restriction when you're doing the elemental diet. And then I know somebody else is asking about, will the elemental diet feed SIBO? Remember, the elemental diet starves those. The whole point is that the elemental diet gets absorbed so quickly that it doesn't even get a chance to feed the bacteria in the small intestine. So that's the sort of premise for the elemental diet. If anybody wants to know more about the elemental diet, I did an amazing masterclass with Dr. Michael Ruscio, and that is at SIBOSOS.com. You can find that there. Okay, a couple of other questions. What's your opinion about, and if you don't know, gosh, Kiran, no worries, but what is your opinion on the impact of good bacteria by taking rifaximin, which is allegedly to stay in the small intestine, or neomycin, which does not stay in the small intestine? What have you seen in your work clinically?
So one of the things we know about both rifaximin, neomycin, or really any antibiotic, is they kill all bacteria, right? So they don't just kill good bacteria or just kill bad bacteria. They kill all bacteria. So there was a very interesting study that I saw presented at a microbiome conference this year that I was speaking in. The speaker came after me. So right after I got done, sat right in the front row, and I got to watch the whole thing. He was basically doing a trial where he took people's microbiome and exposed them to 2 different antibiotics. I think it was Cipro and maybe Augmentin or clindamycin, one of those 2. And what he found is that within about 3 hours, it killed off 99.9% of all bacteria in the gut, right? So everything goes down. Now they start to bounce back and grow back within about 12 hours, but they come back now in different proportions. And typically repeated dosing of that brings back way more unfavorable bacteria than favorable bacteria. And that's where you end up getting the long-term dysbiosis with the use of antibiotics. But what was interesting about his work, because other people have done that first part before, what was interesting is that when he took each individual bacterial genus and species and exposed them to the antibiotic individually, over 98% of them were resistant to the antibiotic. Right? So individually, they were resistant to the antibiotic. Then the question is, how is it that when you expose them collectively, that all of them basically die? When that's because the microbiome is a very intricately connected community, right? So when you disrupt any one of those microbes within the microbiome, it brings down the entire community. It's a house of cards that basically falls down. And so any of these antibiotics, it doesn't matter if it's rifaximin or neomycin, doesn't matter if it stays in the large bowel, moves to the small bowel, all of this stuff, it will disrupt the microbiome in a significant way. Even if it just kills the microbiome in the ileum, it's going to destroy and cause significant impact on the microbiome in the colon. So that it's a community. And the way people rationalize this by saying, oh, rifaximin doesn't move into the colon, so there's no long-term risk. Well, yes, there is, because it's an intimately connected community. And there are studies now that show that when you disrupt one part of the community, you're going to disrupt the other part as well.
Well, we are all connected, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Any advice for two things? One, if you have Candida and
Mhm.
probiotics, and the other is losing weight
Yeah.
and the need for our microbiome to be balanced when we want to lose weight.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with regards to Candida, we there's a couple of ingredients that we like. We like bee propolis seems to help with helping your body kind of detach and get rid of Candida. Improving the diversity of the microbiome is paramount to Candida. Candida is really an opportunistic grower. You have it in your system. It's a normal part of your microbiome in your gut, in your upper respiratory tract, in your urogenital tract. It typically is allowed to overgrow when your microbiome is at low diversity and weak, and then Candida kind of gets to take over to some degree. Candida also overgrows when you have high heavy metal toxicity. So that's another symptom of heavy metal toxicity. So that's something you want to look at as well. If you have an overabundance of Candida, work with your doctor or physician to make sure that you're testing your heavy metal exposure and your heavy metal toxicity. From a probiotic standpoint, believe it or not, using a fungus to get rid of a fungus does make sense. So Saccharomyces boulardii can be very useful in helping get rid of Candida. Bee propolis is something we really like. We just are launching a product, I think either this month or the end of next month, what we're calling Megabalance, which has undecyclinic acid in it and bee propolis, and both of those things together show a great ability to control Candida. The spores have done a great job of controlling Candida as well, and then dietary changes, reducing the sugar, simple carbohydrate intake. But again, diversity in the microbiome always controls Candida. But another big driver is that heavy metal toxicity. So something you really need to look at. Now, when it comes to weight, I'm actually doing a talk not this week, but the next week at a microbiome conference on microbiome and weight management. There's really, two or three really big parts to it. Number one is increased bifidobacteria. Number two is increased Akkermansia. Both of those bacteria protect against fat storage and actually protect against lipogenesis, which is the production of new fat cells. They also increase your body's ability to improve satiety and also stimulate fat burn. So they increase beta oxidation or fatty acid oxidation, that's fat burn. So those two genres of microbe in particular do that well. Short chain fatty acids like butyrate dramatically increase fat burn and improve satiety and increase leptin production after a meal. Leptin production after a meal improves satiety. They also modulate insulin response to food. So both short chain fatty acids, bifidobacteria, Akkermansia, all of those improve insulin sensitivity as well. But here's the crux of it. All of those are increased in growth by using oligosaccharides and prebiotics, right? So if you can't use oligosaccharides and prebiotics because you are SIBO, then it becomes really hard to increase the growth of some of those bacteria. One of the things that will do that is fasting. So fasting will allow Akkermansia to digest some of the mucus layer, and it'll allow it to grow and increase in growth. Now, fasting also improves something called fasting-induced adipose complex, factor, FIAF, fasting-induced adipose factor. Fasting-induced adipose factor plays a really important role in fat burn and satiety as well. So that's something you can add in. If you're a SIBO person, you can't add a bunch of oligosaccharides and prebiotics into your intake and diet, then at least you can start looking at adding in intermittent fasting. That'll help with some of the microbiome changes that you need to see in order to support weight loss.
Ooh. Akkermansia sounds like some horrible disease, by the way.
Doesn't it?
Caused by some
right.
Yeah.
You'll either become a superhero or you get a horrible disease. But but some of the most protective bacteria out there have some strange names like Akkermansia mucinophilia, Faecalibacter prausnitzii. These are all really, really important microbes, but they sound scary.
Yeah, they do. Okay, we are looking at wrapping up in the next four or 5 minutes. So we want to finish strong. Thanks, everybody, for your great questions today. Do herbal antimicrobials also disrupt the biome as much as pharmaceutical antibiotics?
They do. They do it a little bit slower. They're not as powerful. They're not like atom bombs to the microbiome, but they do. And that's a common misconception I'm often talking to people about because I'll meet someone who's been on oregano oil for a year, and that's going to have a long-term lasting detrimental effect on your microbiome because it is still an antimicrobial. And even though they're herbal, they don't discern between good and bad bacteria. They will kill bacteria in general. So if you're using an antimicrobial, like a good one, I don't know if people have used is like biocidin. You use it, for a period of time, and then you try to get your diet back, try to expand some of the macronutrient intake, and then take a good probiotic that increases diversity, like the spores.
What do you think about FMT, fecal microbiota transplant?
Yeah, so far it's been shown to be really effective against recurrent C. diff infection. Not much more than that. One of the problems with FMT is you can make significant changes to the colonic flora, but you're not necessarily making changes to the small gut or even the proximal part of the large intestine, like the ascending or the transverse colon. So those areas aren't necessarily being changed. But if you, and also it takes a number of implantations for it to actually stick. Your gut and your immune system kind of keep rejecting these new bacteria that are coming in from another host. So to me, that's like a end stage. I'm absolutely desperate. Nothing else is working. I've literally tried everything. I'm just going to go for it and try FMT. The only people that I think should go to that first are people with, serious recurrent serious recurrent C. diff infection. So if you're on your like third or fourth bout of C. diff, then I would go FMT because you're just going to keep getting hit by antibiotics like vancomycin, and it's just going to keep making the problem worse. And there's like a 98% success rate with C. diff infections. So it does work really well for that. But other than that, the studies are very limited on its effect on anything else.
And that's certainly what Dr. Pimentel also just talked about that with one of the Q&As we just did with him as well. So I know a lot of us want to think, oh, that could be the magic bullet, but so far for SIBO, that is not the case. Another thing I just wanted to comment about with the prokinetics, a lot of people think that prokinetics are a laxative. Right. And guys, they're not. So just for clarity's sake, you do have to make sure that, your dose is right and that you are also using other things to move your constipation along. I find that everything does go better for me when I am doing my Resolor and my prokinetic along with other stuff. Especially when I take it right before I go to sleep and I know I'm going to have this intermittent fasting from sleeping for hopefully 8 hours. Yeah. So just to clarify, because there's a little bit of a question there that I wanted to clarify. I think we were clear, but not just like, that's really important because if you're doing a prokinetic and you're expecting it to work like taking magnesium, it doesn't.
It doesn't now. Yeah.
Totally different types of the way that the mechanism works. Okay, what was the exact name for the IgG product? Mega IgG or Immune?
Yeah, Mega IgG. It's got, it's a 2 gram dose of IgG in capsule. And you get, 2 gram dose of the serum immunoglobulin, which has about 55% IgG in it. Extremely effective. The way we even came across it is I was working in a small group that were developing studies around HIV patients because HIV patients suffer from leaky gut more than anything else. That's the number one thing that kills them actually is leaky gut. And this group that has this IgG product has done a couple of studies in HIV patients and showed really strong results and in the worst kind of inflamed leaky gut, which is HIV enteropathy. So we said we've got to start working with this product because it's really quite a phenomenal product in terms of gut inflammation and so on.
Okay, one more time. What is it called?
Mega IgG.
Okay. Guys, can you pop into the Facebook comments and feed and send some love to Kiran, thanking him for his time and his brilliance? I always like to do that so no one thinks that they're just talking into a vacuum. Obviously, we've had some great comments and questions. Thank you so much for being here. I do have to keep my my time commitments to my speakers right on time, so they want to come back, if you know what I mean. So
Yes.
we're going to wrap. I even went over, which I broke my own rule, but Kiran, thank you so much
You're
for all your
welcome.
wisdom. If somebody wants to get a hold of Megaspore, they should talk to their healthcare provider, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And any healthcare provider can go on and sign up for an account and get you the product. And then the same with the prebiotic. If people want to try that, we're seeing success with SIBO patients with this prebiotic because it's slightly different than what you've seen out there, but we go very slow, teeny tiny amounts of it. And then one more thing I forgot to mention. One of the things that becomes an issue in SIBO is the constant reduction in diversity in microbiome, because your diet is not very varied and you're not doing a lot of fermentable carbohydrates. One of the ingredients that has been shown to actually increase microbiome diversity are polyphenols. So, you can look at increasing your intake of polyphenols, which shouldn't exacerbate your SIBO symptoms because they're not fermentable compounds for the most part. They do instead feed bacteria in very specific ways. So we work with the polyphenol mix in one of our products, a product called Mega Mucosal Support, and the polyphenol mix is called a Microbiome X, and it's a citrus polyphenol. But you can look at different sources of polyphenols and try to get more of that in. That will help increase some of the diversity in the microbiome. So last tip.
Okay, what if we don't wash our vegetables before we eat them? I feel like that's going to give me a bug if I don't. When somebody's saying, should I just leave the dirt on them? I don't know.
It depends on where you get the vegetables from. If it's
Right.
in your own garden and you've started off with good clean soil and so on, then it's totally fine. I mean, I would rinse it off just to get the dirt off, but the bacteria will still stay on there. You don't have to soak it in apple cider vinegar and doing all that. I eat the fruits and vegetables out of my garden just by rinsing off the dirt and consuming it. That's perfectly fine. But if it's coming from the store, you have no idea what it went through and what kind of contaminants it has on it and all that. So I would wash those pretty good.
And he lives in
Chicago.
the Midwest in Chicago. Yep. That's right. I was like, should I say where he lives? I don't know. Should I? I don't know. He lives in Chicago. And so if he has a garden where he can grow, eat food from his own garden, guys, you can do that from your terraces. I know it's another big project, but there are people out there who are trying to help all of us to grow our own food. Even if it's just a couple of things, I think it does help.
Exactly.
All right. I love you.
It doesn't have to be much. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't. Thank you so much. I don't want to take up any more.
Thank you. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye, guys.
Good. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody. I'm going to end this up.